Hello and welcome to another episode of the DVD Graveyard. Tonight we're going to be talking about, the one and only, the excellent Black Christmas from 1974, directed by Bob Clark. And if you've spent any time on my channel and watched any of my previous videos, you will have heard me bring up Black Christmas, because this is one of my favorite horror films of all time, without a doubt. Definitely in the top 10, if not in the top 5 of my favorite horror films of all time. I love it so much. And it's one that I really feel like does not get a lot of credit. I don't really hear a lot of people talking about this movie, and it's highly underrated. And it did so much for the slasher genre and just the horror genre in general, in establishing a lot of tropes that are now just commonplace in a lot of films. And I think a lot of people, again, it flies under people's radar. A lot of people from the 70s, at least people that I know, they know of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. They know, Halloween. I even know people who surprisingly know of Deep Red, which came out after this, which is a giallo film, which I have more to say about that in just a minute. But really just off the wall stuff like that. But I still run into people that don't really know Black Christmas, and it really surprises me, because this movie, again, if you are a fan of classic 70s horror, which is my favorite era of horror films, I feel like you should know this film, because it's done so much, and its influence is felt in so many horror films, even to this day. I think it's done so much. Without this movie, I truly believe that Halloween wouldn't really have become what it is. I think Halloween owes a lot to this movie, regardless of if John Carpenter says so or not. Because if you watch them back to back, you will feel the Black Christmas influence in Halloween, without a doubt. I mean, they are very similar. I'm not saying that Halloween is a ripoff of Black Christmas by any means. That's not what I'm saying. All I'm saying is that this was a big influence on the making of that film. That's what I think anyway. I mean, without a doubt. Now this movie does, feel a lot like a giallo film of the early 70s. Instead of a traditional slasher film, which is what I hear this movie, anytime I do hear about it, it gets lumped into the slasher genre. But I don't think that it's that simple, because it's just like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which came out the same year. And another little fun fact, actually came out the same day as Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Black Christmas did. Texas Chainsaw was released October the 11th. Black Christmas was released October the 11th in Canada, but it wouldn't come to the United States until late December of that same year. Originally released as Silent Night, Evil Night. So I'm really glad they changed the title of that. But those are two films that I always hear get lumped into the slasher genre. But they're both films that I don't think of as a slasher. Like, whenever I think of a slasher film, they are not the first films that come to my mind by any means. But they are a big influence on them. They're proto-slashers to me. That's the way I see them. This film, it feels much more like a giallo film of the early 70s, something like and 60s and so on and so forth. But like films like Blood and Black Lace, The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, A Bay of Blood, Torso, Deep Red again, stuff like that. That's really what this film feels a lot more like to me, and because that's really what you had, whereas I think giallo was really kind of the first sort of stepping stone in that kind of slasher movement, I guess. You kind of start there, and then you start to kind of get to films like this, which refine it a little bit more and a little bit more, until you finally, and it just, tropes get established with each incarnation, throughout this time period, to when you finally get to Halloween, where it just kind of takes all those things that worked and brought it together into what we now know as the slasher, and was further refined even more with Friday the 13th, and then so on and so forth, just kind of blossomed from there. So I don't see this movie as a slasher film. I see this as an excellent '70s horror film, and I would call it a proto slasher if I were to lump it into any category. And like I said, this movie does such a good job at establishing so many tropes in the slasher and just horror genre. I can't recommend this film enough. If you haven't seen it, definitely go check it out right now. Because I am going to spoil it a little bit. For anyone that hasn't seen it, I'm not going to delve too deeply on it, but I am going to be giving away some things that happen in this movie that to me would have been left better unspoiled, even though this movie's over 50 years old at this point. But like I said, I feel like it's still relevant. So this movie was directed by the late great Bob Clark, who unfortunately he passed away actually shortly after the remake of this film came out in 2006. He passed away just a couple years after that, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And we've crossed paths with Bob Clark once before. He directed Death Dream, also known as Dead of Night, which came out the same year. It had a lot of the same crew, I think, working on that film as that's working on this film, which is also excellent movie. Highly recommend it. It makes a good pairing piece with Black Christmas. Personally, I think that makes a good little double feature because they really feel they have a very similar kind of vibe to them. This movie, I think, is funny because Bob Clark has made, in my personal opinion, one of the keystone Christmas horror films, but he also made one of the keystone just Christmas films, which is A Christmas Story. He directed that film as well. So I think that's funny that he's done kind of both sides of that holiday themed film, with A Christmas Story and Black Christmas. So this movie has a pretty big name cast too for the time. So kind of our main character here is Olivia Hussey, which she actually unfortunately just passed away just last year. This movie turned 50 years old last year, and she passed away. I think shortly around the anniversary of this film, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember off the top of my head. I knew her best from the It miniseries from the 1990s with Tim Curry playing Pennywise. Which is great. I'll always prefer that one over the new It films, 100%, without a doubt. This movie also stars Margot Kidder, who I know best from Amityville Horror, the original Amityville Horror, with James Brolin. That's a great film. I'd love to talk about that at some point. This movie, she actually passed away, sadly, just a few years ago as well. John Saxon is also in this movie, the great John Saxon, who, has been in so much shit. I could sit here and just list off John Saxon's roles for days, but he's most notable from in the horror genre from Nightmare on Elm Street. I think that's kind of the main thing that I remember him from. And then of course he was great in Enter the Dragon. Always been a big Bruce Lee fan, and old kind of kung fu movies. But he was great in Enter the Dragon, which I think was the year before this movie. So I was really glad to see him. The great Keir Dullea, which I believe he is. It's Dullea or Delay or however you say his name. He's still alive, I believe, and he was from 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is kind of an all-time great space sci-fi movie. I think that movie, was directed by Stanley Kubrick. I think that movie will always be relevant, and it was such a big achievement in special effects. Even to this day, that movie looks amazing. And then Andrea Martin is in this movie, who she also came back for the 2006 remake. I believe she played the house mother in the remake, which I have a few things to say about the remake. I'll save that for the end because I'm not going to delve into it too deeply, because I'd like to talk about that movie probably next year, because it's going to be 20 years old next year. Jesus Christ, that makes me feel so old that movie's already going to be 20 years old. But like I said, I'm not going to dive too deep on this, but this is more going to be a Black Christmas praise, if anything. But yeah, because I love this film. I have the Scream Factory Blu-ray. I'm a big Scream Factory fan, of course, which has just the coolest fucking cover art I've ever seen for this movie. I love the cover art that they did. I love all of Scream Factory's cover art that they do, but this one is especially one of my favorites. On the slip cover, it just looks so cool. I also have a DVD version of this as well. But this is a really good release if you can get your hands on it. I got it pretty cheap, to be honest with you, just a few years ago. I've had the DVD for a while, but I got this either no, it was year before last, I think I got this. Got it very cheap off eBay. It's got a lot of good special features on it, and the movie looks great as well. So I'm just going to read the plot synopsis off the back of this. The college town of Bedford is receiving an unwelcome guest this Christmas. As the residents of sorority house Pi Kappa Sigma prepare for the festive season, a stranger begins to stalk the house. A series of obscene phone calls start to plague the residents of the sorority, and it becomes clear that a psychopath is homing in on the sisters with dubious intentions. And though the police try to trace the calls, they discover that nothing is as it seems during this Black Christmas. Stuffed with extremely tense moments, chilling cinematography, amazing characters, and long-lasting dread, this genuine classic is completely deserving of every bit of respect and admiration it's picked up over the last 40 years. And that last little quote was written by addictedtohorrormovies.com, which is great, because I believe that this movie deserves a lot of recognition, a lot more than what it gets. The opening to this is so chilling, and it really just sets up the sense of dread that this movie has all throughout it, and the kind of impending doom that this movie brings with it. It's just a very quiet opening. We get a shot of the house. And it's windy, and it's just this kind of creepy, dark, cold Christmas night, or Christmas Eve, or a couple days prior, whenever it is. And we get the main title, Black Christmas, in this just kind of quiet scene. That's great. I think we get a little bit of Christmas music in the background from some carolers. And we get these excellent POV shots of the killer, which again would be used later on in Halloween, Friday the 13th. Did that as well. So it's a great little opening that definitely sets up kind of what's going on, and it's so eerie. We see the killer go into the house, through this POV shot. He climbs up this lattice on the side of the house, and he goes into the attic, and the inside the sorority house, all of the girls, Olivia Hussey and Margot Kidder and all of them, they're kind of having this party, and they start to get these obscene phone calls that are so creepy, and they just get progressively creepier as the film goes on. And they're just kind of fucking with him on the phone. They're not really taking it seriously. And they're I think even one of the girls is like, there was a girl that was, just raped recently here in town, so you should probably take this a little bit more seriously. And they're like, Margot Kidder's like, sweetheart, you can't rape a townie, and just being really just rude. Margot Kidder is drunk this whole movie, drunk and smoking a cigarette the whole film. She's great in this. It makes this one girl very upset. Claire, I believe, is her name, and she goes upstairs to pack because she's going to go with her, with her family. She's packing up to leave for Christmas, and that's when we get our first kill, which is this excellent scene where Billy, our killer, which we don't know him as this just yet, and it's never even really expressly said that his name is Billy in the film, or even in the credits, but they refer to him as Billy in the script, and they're actually was supposed to be a lot more backstory on the character, which I'll touch on that here in just a little bit. But she is killed with a plastic bag from this dress. He's hiding in her closet, and he wraps this plastic bag around her head and drags her up into the attic. And that's the last we see of Claire. But it's such a genius setup because no one questions her disappearance at first, because of course they think she was just packing up to leave, and she was mad at Margot Kidder's character, so that we think that she just got pissed off and left without telling anyone, and she's gone. So it's a really great way to kind of get around the fact that that she just disappeared and no one really said anything about it. And of course the party goes on, and Margot Kidder just gets drunker and drunker, and as we kind of go on, that's when we meet Keir Dullea, who is dating Olivia Hussey, and we find out that Olivia Hussey is pregnant with his child. And this is a very progressive thing, for this time, because he basically wants her to have the baby. He wants to quit living at the commissary because he wants to be like a concert pianist, and he's just prepared to kind of throw everything away and become a dad and get a real job. And he wants Olivia Hussey to kind of quit school and have this baby, and she doesn't want to do that. She doesn't want to throw her career away. She wants to have a career. She doesn't want to be tied to him with this baby. So she wants to have an abortion, which, again, is a very, very deep topic to cover for a horror film. Especially, again, if you want to call this a slasher film, it definitely is a very deep topic to cover for something like this. And it adds a lot of sympathy for Olivia Hussey's character, because again, abortion is a very heavy topic to talk about, even in a film, and even to this day, it still is. I think it was a very progressive thing for them to tackle, for the time, especially in the 1970s, where abortion was just again, like I said, even to this day, it's a horrible topic to bring up for a lot of people. But, for them to tackle something like this in the 70s, I think it was very, very brave and very deep. So he's pissed, and that kind of gives him a bit of motive, which, we'll talk about that some more later on in the film. That gives him something to kind of be angry about. As we go on, Claire, her father comes to look for her, and they're going, all over they're putting out a search party. They end up going to the police, who is led by, the main detective is John Saxon, who does a great job in this film. And that's another reason why I kind of think, again, this was a great kind of middle ground between when Giallo was starting to kind of become, the slasher kind of genre, because this, it has a lot of the police detective kind of stuff, where because that was a big thing for the Giallo films of the time. Was it really, instead of being from the point of view of your victims, it was more of a sort of a whodunit kind of murder mystery from the point of view of the investigators who are investigating these crimes. So he wants to tap the phones, and they lead this big search party to go and find Claire. And at the same time, everyone is kind of packing up and leaving the house, this sorority house to go on, to their respective stuff that they have going on for Christmas. They end up finding this girl who is murdered in the park there, because everybody's out looking, and we don't see it, which is great. But just everyone's reaction, you just get this idea of something horrible has happened to this girl. And, we're led to believe that Billy did this prior to coming into the house, or he left the house maybe and went and did this. But he is now in the house, and that just, again, sets up even further, kind of gives us something to go off of with Billy. So I want to put a pin in kind of the story there and talk a little bit about Billy, because the thing about him is, again, like I said, he's not even really given the name Billy. It's just kind of become his name over the years in the community. But he is such an excellent horror villain in this film. You never see him, and he's never explained. I know that in the script, supposedly a lot more backstory was written for Billy. Like, we got a lot more stuff about him, which again was explained a lot more in the remake, which I'll touch on in a little bit. But what they did is we get Billy's backstory through these phone calls that he's, when he calls the house, because he just says these really crazy, obscene things in multiple voices, which of course he was voiced by Bob Clark, as well as a few of the other people who worked on this film, and so we kind of piece it together ourselves. And I mean, he could just be lying. We never know, what exactly he's talking about. And I think that that's so great because again, I'm the kind of person who I like to put things together myself. I think the mysterious aspect behind your killer is a lot stronger than explaining your character. Again, with the original Halloween, I think Michael Myers, not being thoroughly explained made him so much more terrifying. And I feel the same way with Billy. I actually think, Billy is a very strong, again, I don't really want to refer to him as a slasher villain, but such a strong character in this film is because we don't really know anything. We don't know what he looks like. We hear his voice, but he's doing several different voices, so we don't really know even what his real voice sounds like. The only things that we see is we see his silhouette and we see his hands. We see his feet, kind of coming up on screen. We see his eye being illuminated from certain points in the film. We see like the excellent scene where he is going to stab Margot Kidder's character. We only really see his silhouette with his eye illuminated. So I mean, it's so great. Again, he makes such an eerie horror villain. I love this character. It was ruined in the Black Christmas 2006 remake, which just all that mystery and all the great things that were established by this film. Which again, I'll talk more about that in a little bit. So love the character of Billy. So anyway. Everyone is packing up and getting ready to leave the house. The house mother, Mrs. Mack, hears the cat in the attic, and she goes up to look for the cat. And when she gets up there, that's when we discover that Claire is still in the attic in this rocking chair, which we get several shots of her throughout the film with her face still, her mouth wide open, her eyes, wide open, just looking horrified and covered with this saran wrap. And she's in this rocking chair. And Billy has this kind of, you only really see his hands, and he's holding this kind of hook thing that I guess they use to pull furniture and things up into the attic. And he throws this at Mrs. Mack, hooking her, which we don't see it. It's all off screen, and he pulls her up into the attic. So that's kind of our next kill. And there's really not a lot of kills in this film, not a lot of gore by any means. Again, if as to what would come later, or even what some of the films were doing at that time, like some of your Giallo films, it really was not all that gory. It was just a lot of implication, which is great. Again, it does so well. So like I said earlier, John Saxon's character, playing the detective, he's tapping the phones, and he overhears a conversation between Olivia Hussey and Keir Dullea, where they're arguing over this abortion thing, which, she doesn't say it flat out over the phone, but later she tells John Saxon kind of what they're arguing about. And he starts to kind of hone in on Peter. And Peter, at this point, he's gone to his music recital, and he has flunked it, but he's told her that he's thrown it all away because he wants to have this baby with her, and she's still, standing strong on the fact that she wants to have this abortion, and he just cannot stand it. He ends up smashing this piano that this school has, and he just comes undone. And he even says to her at one point, he's like, you talk about this as if it's, you're just getting a wart removed. He's very, very frustrated about all this. And it's interesting that he says that because Billy says almost the exact same thing on the phone. He says that quote, which really kind of starts to lead us to believe, Peter is our killer. And if you really look at them, they have a very similar build. Again, we don't see Billy clearly. We only, hear his voice as he's doing several different voices, and we see his silhouette. And they have a very similar build. They're wearing very similar clothes. So we're kind of led to believe that it is Peter, this whole time. And so Peter kind of just disappears from the movie. Then Olivia Hussey is just kind of alone in the house. I know that Margot Kidder's character passes out at one point, or she gets really sick because she's been drinking this whole film. So she finally passes out for the film, and we get another excellent shot, like I was talking about earlier, where Billy stabs her with this kind of glass unicorn statue that she has laying over her bed. And it's this great scene, with Billy lifting up the unicorn over his head, and we just get the shot of his silhouette standing over her with his eye, illuminated, and he's kind of creeping around her bed and everything. And it's just so freaky, so creepy. He kills her. Andrea Martin's character is killed off screen. We don't really see her get killed. And then when we do find out where these calls are coming from after the phones have been tapped, it's this excellent scene where John Saxon finds out that the calls are coming from inside the house. Because there is another line, which they said something about it earlier in the film, that there's another phone line in this house, but they didn't bother to tap that line for some reason. So Billy has been in the house this whole time calling them from upstairs. And that is such a creepy reveal. And again, the movie When a Stranger Calls, I believe, which came out in 1976, the original one did, that movie really kind of gets a lot of the credit for that trope. But I think that this was the first film to ever do that, to do the whole, the calls are coming from inside the house, which also was a trope. I think it was originally established in the sort of urban legend of the babysitter. So, if somebody's watching this movie now, they're going to be like, oh, that's so cliche, blah, blah, blah. But that hadn't been done yet, in 1974, that was completely new, and I just, it's so great. That's such a great reveal. And once they find out, the police speed over to the house. Olivia Hussey goes upstairs to check on Barbara and Phyllis, Andrea Martin's character, and she finds that they've been killed. And she hears this kind of whispering on the other side of the door. And when she looks through the crack in the door, we just see an eyeball staring back at her, this crazy looking eye, which is Billy. And he's just kind of whispering to himself, Agnes, it's me, Billy. It's so creepy. And she hits him with the door, and he chases her throughout the house. And I mean, the sounds that this man is making are so eerie. I mean, he sounds like a monster coming after her. And she runs down into the basement and locks the door, and he's just pounding and banging on this door from the other side, trying his hardest to get in. I mean, it sounds like a fucking bear on the other side of the door trying to get into this room. And so he stops, and we wait a few minutes, and then we see Peter coming to the basement window. And he kind of sees Olivia Hussey in there, and he's, Jess, it's me. And he breaks the window and comes down into there. And again, we are led to believe that it is Peter who has been doing this, this whole time. And when he breaks in, he comes down there, and right at this time, the police show up, and they go downstairs, and Jess has killed Peter. And because she was so terrified, because she thought, she thought he was Billy. She never really got a good look at Billy either, from, I guess, from what I understand. And so she's laying there, he is dead, and she is unconscious. She's passed out. So the police take her into her room, and she's sleeping, and they're like, I can't believe he did this. We found that piano all smashed up. And this and that, and they're convinced that they have their man, and they're like, let's leave her alone to sleep here for a little while, because we're not going to be able to get anything from her for a while. So the house kind of clears out, and it's silent, and we're just left with Olivia Hussey taking a nap in this house. We get these really eerie, creepy shots of us panning through the house. and we go up into the attic window where we see Claire is still in the attic, in this same position. They've been looking for her this whole movie, never found her. She's still in the attic, and we hear Billy's voice from off screen, Agnes, it's me, Billy. Don't tell Mother what we've done, and it's just such a creepy reveal because at this point, when I first saw this movie, I was truly convinced that it was Peter. I was like, oh, this is like a Giallo film, and I was like, that was kind of a easy, explanation, or an easy sort of red herring, I guess, being Peter. It's easy to find out it was him, but no, it's not Peter. The killer survived, and he is still in the house, and that is so creepy because now Jess is completely alone in the house with Billy, and we pan out away from this window, and Claire's face is just still in this rocking chair in the window, and we pan out, and we cut, and we get credits. And that is the end. I mean, it is such a powerful, impactful ending, and it is one of the best endings to any film of this kind, especially from the 1970s. It's amazing. I definitely think Halloween, again, had a big, this was a big influence on Halloween because the ending, the killer gets away. And I think that's great because he's still out there. He could come to your house next, was the implication. And again, I don't think it could have ended any better. So that is Black Christmas from 1974. I can't say enough good things about this movie. Like I said, this was more of just a praise, video rather than an actual review. Because this movie is amazing. It's subtle, it's smart, it's calculated, and it's just a very powerful movie, and it's great. I can't say enough good things about it. Unfortunately, I will say that this movie, I may have said it earlier in this review, I'm not sure, but unfortunately nowadays, I think that this movie will kind of be lost on a lot of people because if you go into this movie expecting to see something like Halloween, or like Friday the 13th or Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you probably will be disappointed because this movie is very slow. There's not a very big body count. There's not a lot of, there's not a lot of violence in this movie, which, honestly, those other films are not very violent either. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is really not as violent as people remember it being. It's just kind of the context and the way that the film was shot and everything that kind of, gives you that impression. But this movie is very subtle and it shows a lot of restraint, but it's very powerful. And it's got a very, it tackles some very deep topics in this movie. And again, I can't say enough good things about it. But I think that nowadays it's a little too slow for a lot of modern audiences. But if you're the kind of person like me and you like a good classic, slow burn, subtle horror film, I think that, this is great. I think everyone should see it. I don't know a lot of people who have seen it, and a lot of people who have seen it kind of remember it a little bit differently. And I know a lot of people who've seen the remake, but they don't really know that it was a remake, by any means. So having said that, there is a remake from 2006, Black Christmas, or Black Xmas as the cover is kind of stylized as, which came out in 2006. It gets the Rob Zombie treatment that this, the same that Halloween that he did with Halloween 2007. So Black Christmas 2006 came out the same year. I'm sorry, not the same year. It came out in the big boom of remakes. We got the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake. The Hills Have Eyes remake came out the same year. Rob Zombie's Halloween remake, the Friday the 13th remake came shortly after that. So that was during the big boom of the remakes of the early 2000s, and it does exactly what all of those remakes do. It definitely kind of goes over the top in a lot of ways. Now, having said that, I don't hate, a lot of those movies that I just talked about. And I don't hate the Black Christmas remake either. I don't hate it. I do enjoy watching it, and I will still watch it every now and then. But What I do have to say about it is it takes everything that the original movie excelled at in being mysterious and dark and dread, building up the sense of dread and tension and everything, and it basically cranks it up to 11. I mean, it's like the original Black Christmas on methamphetamine, basically. Like it is so blown out of proportion and so extreme and so violent and just over the top. And like I said, it gets that kind of Rob Zombie treatment. That's really what it reminds me of. It's like if Rob Zombie had made Black Christmas. So I do want to talk about it. I'll probably talk about it next year because, like I said, next year will be the 20th anniversary of the Black Christmas remake. And I don't hate it. I will always, which goes with, just about any of these films, I will always prefer the original, without a doubt, 110%. But it is still a fun time. It has a really great atmosphere to it. And it is a fun movie to watch. And I do enjoy it for what it is. But comparing it to the original, it doesn't hold a candle to the original by any means. Just like, with any of those others that I talked about, I will always prefer the original. And there is another remake of Black Christmas, which came out in 2019. And I have yet to watch that one. I haven't seen it yet. I've heard very mixed things about it. I do want to watch it just so that I can say I have. From what I understand, it's not a bad movie, but it should not have been linked to Black Christmas. Just from what I understand, and even looking at the poster and watching the trailer, I can tell that it's not really going to be, it's not really going to have anything to do with Black Christmas. So I don't really know anything about it other than that. I'll have to watch it. Maybe I'll review that one in a couple of years whenever I finally do decide to watch it. But for now, I am just going to stick to the quintessential, the excellent, amazing original film from 1974. Again, I cannot say enough good things about it. If you have not seen this, you must go see it, especially if you're a fan of, old school classic 70s horror. I think this movie pairs very well with like the original Halloween. It's a good kind of double feature. Even watching it alongside Bob Clark's Death Dream is a great time because it's got a lot of the same people working on it. The same composer, is in this film as in Death Dream, because the music sounds very similar, which is something I meant to say earlier. The music in this movie is excellent. I apologize I didn't say more about that, but the music is so good and so fitting in this movie and really establishes a great vibe. So yeah, that is it for me on Black Christmas, and that is probably it for my videos, or my reviews, I guess I should say. These are not really videos, but my reviews until probably after the first of the year. I think I am going to take a little bit of a break after I do this one. I might have one more in me, to cover. I don't know. We'll see. But I definitely wanted to get Black Christmas out of the way. I've got a lot of stuff I'm really looking forward to talking about next year. I don't really have anything lined up necessarily yet. I have a few that I want to talk about, but I haven't really decided when or what I'm going to do exactly. I want to talk about the Howling films. That's one that that's a series that I've really been waiting to talk about. We're getting 3 Friday the 13th next year, so be looking forward to not all the Friday the 13th, but I'm going to cover as many of them as I can. I do want to cover some of the Texas Chainsaw sequels next year. There's several that I want to cover, so look forward to that. If you like my videos, and until next time and until next year, I hope everyone has an excellent Christmas and has an excellent New Year, and as always, have a great night and goodbye.